Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. I hope you're well. My name is Andrew, and on behalf of DS Consortium, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the official launch of the DS Knowledge Web Lab webinar series. Our year-long initiative dedicated to convening practitioners, policymakers, innovators, and emerging talents for knowledge sharing, collaboration, and growth across Africa and the Middle East. This series is brought to you by DS Knowledge Lab, the training and capacity building arm of DS Consortium, committed to supporting inclusive, data-driven, and tech-enabled developments across the region. So about today's session, we're especially excited to launch with you our Girls in ICT for Inclusive Digital Transformation series. So this will be a three-part series, a three-part dialogue in celebration of International Girls in ICT Day, as marked by the International Telecommunication Union. Today's session is themed Inclusive Digital Transformation, and will explore inclusive participation in the digital economy, regional perspectives on inclusion in ICT, and the role of leadership, mentorship, and representation. Regarding the purpose and vision, this conversation is not just about dialogue. It's about laying the foundation for stronger institutional support for girls and young women pursuing careers in ICT across both policy and practice. It's about igniting long-term cross-regional collaboration and unlocking opportunity where it's long been overdue. So a bit of housekeeping. The webinar is being recorded right now, and we'll post the recording later. And please use the chats to share any thoughts, any reflections, and questions throughout the session. And with that, it is now my honor to introduce today's moderator, Efwa Dugan, who is the principal consultant at DS Consortium. She is a seasoned data and digital strategy leader and the driving force behind this series. So, Efwa, over to you.
Hi, thank you so very much. I just realized my video went off. Great. Thank you so very much, Andrew. Welcome everyone to today's webinar session. We're very much happy to have you all join us from every part of the world. We've got our speakers joining us from different parts of the globe. And to begin with, I think today's session on girls in ICT is, as we already mentioned, is for inclusive digital transformation, which commemorates girls in ICT. And we're going to kick it off with three-part dialogue. And this is the first session we're going to have today. Now, but before I introduce our speakers, I'd like to briefly share why this theme deeply resonates with me. And I would mention that though I began my career in investment banking, my exposure to technology came very early. I remember quite clearly at the age of 4, I had my first Vita computer, and by 8, my first email address. And 11, I was already typing documents for people at my grandmother's communication center. And even though that early exposure happened, I never really considered that I would, have a tech career, a tech viable career, until I had an opportunity to be in a management trainee program, which pivoted me into this space. And so the story clearly reflects the journey of many young women, that early exposure without clear pathways, can more or less help them be in the journey in a tech space, or might not help them be in the tech space. And that's why we are here today, to better understand, the intersects of that early exposure and having a clear pathway into the tech space. And so we'll explore that on a regional basis, where we would have our speakers coming from the US, Ghana, and then India, who have various global perspective. And then they will share insights into some of the regional challenges. They will share insight into mentorship, and then the structured pathway or gaps that still exist that would help, any young woman or girl looking to chart a path into tech. and of course build a more inclusive digital economy. So without further much ado, I am delighted to be joined by three phenomenal women leaders whose experience span three continents. We have Cher Fox. Cher is the president and founder of Fox Consulting, a veteran in the data industry and an advocate for women in data and ICT. Cher is joining us with Professor Mercy Badu, who happens to be the Associate Professor of Chemistry and the co-founder of Women in STEM Ghana. And she's bringing insights from the academic side of academia and science leadership. Our third speaker is Sravasti Bhatterjee, who happens to be a former Vodafone Global Executive and telecom or technology business leader. And she's coming with a unique blend of telecom, military, and business transformation experience. And so, welcome, speakers. Very much happy to have you all here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, so due to time, we want to be very mindful of time. So due to time, I will, of course, just go right into it. Starting with Cher, right? We want to better understand your perspective on this particular topic that we are having, and we want to understand from where the region you're coming from the US, you've worked in the US, you've lived in the US, you have exposure and understanding there. What progress or shift have you seen in the last decade regarding women's inclusion in data or in tech?
Yeah, thank you for having me. We're definitely seeing an uptake in women-sponsored programs, women-directed conferences, more engagement with young women in high school to get them more curious about tech, more involved with tech. We have so many amazing groups, especially based in Colorado, which has a couple really strong tech hubs in the States. We have women in data, women in tech, Latinas in tech, girls who code. We have all these beautiful groups that are working together to help women navigate either their transition in tech or their growth in tech, and just overall support. And we're seeing it happen with younger and younger generations. Our high schools are working on programs to help not just young women, but young students get certifications and be more business ready when they graduate high school. So that's become a really big initiative just in the past several years, beyond just the last decade. So Colorado is definitely ahead of the curve on that. I do work with clients in other states. I work with clients globally, work with clients in North America, South America. I need to be asking more of these questions of, what are they seeing in their areas, and, how we can all better support these women in tech initiatives.
Great. So from what you're saying, in the last decade, there's been a vibrant growth in various initiatives, inclusive initiative. You mentioned the Latinas in tech, women in tech, all of that, various initiative in the Americas, right? And so as we continue to examine the state of gender inclusion across the regions, Prof, what has been the systemic challenges hindering girls in Ghana or West Africa from fully entering the digital economy? I mean, you have set up the Women in STEM, community. There should have been something that actually drove you to start such initiative. So what was the challenge that you had seen in your environment that propelled you into taking this bold step with your co-founder? Yeah, if you could share a bit more insight.
Right. Thank you very much for having me on the show. So it's very interesting. In Africa, and of course to narrow down in Ghana, there's a huge challenge that we face with regards to gender, especially in the fields of STEM, because the understanding is that the STEM field is not directly straightforward. And so one tends to spend a lot of time either in education or building capacity to be able to do well and excel in the field. And so as we are growing up, the social-cultural factors affect their decision. So for example, in a family, if you have male and females as children, there's a decision who takes on what. And the issue is that in our cultural settings too, parents do have a say as to what a child will do when they are going to school. And so these affect the issues and these affect choices, especially for young ladies when they are growing up, for them to choose career paths instead. And so the first issue is the gender stereotyping. So there's huge stereotyping. The understanding is that the STEM field, the tech area, the tech industry, ICT is for the male. So in our part of the world, it's actually male dominated. And so a parent, for example, I'm a young parent growing up, what I see is males in the industry. And so I would want to advise my daughter, do you really want to do this? Do you think you have the strength? Mm-hmm. So it's as if the young lady is weak and cannot go into such areas. And so it's a huge problem that we need to take off this stereotype, which is actually from the families where young ladies are growing. Encouragement, they are not encouraged. So for example, probably as you were growing up, you had the love to be in tech. Mm-hmm. Somebody will sit somewhere like, no, what are you going to use this for? How is this going to help you? Do you know the length of time you are going to acquire knowledge, go to school? You need to finish this, come home, marry, and have children, and make a family. And so that will automatically, put the woman somewhere or the young lady growing up. Mm-hmm. Not to pursue this. Another issue is lack of infrastructure. Okay. So we do not have enough infrastructure that will cause people to venture into this and see this often. And so there's a kind of competition. So the young ladies are competing with the young men. And I don't know whether this is really African or this is probably global. You realize that the young lady do have a low risk level. So you would rather want to settle for something that is quite easy, immediately you can do, fetch C results, than to take the risk. So the young men, for example, for me in academia, when you are teaching in class, you see that the young men easily will raise up their hands to answer. Alert from low battery. Because they are not afraid whether they get it wrong or they get it right. But because the risk level of the young lady is low, their attempt is very low. They really do not want to attempt into it. And so if you have limited infrastructure, you see that the men or their male counterparts do get into it more than their female counterparts. And so that is also a very key issue. Of course, they come to school and the teachers that are teaching them are all males. We have few or limited female teachers or instructors in ICT or in STEM. And so they don't see role models. They don't see us. So even if you are my daughter and I'm telling you that going into STEM is doable, when you go to school, you don't see the teaching you. So what mommy is saying probably is not true. Maybe somebody is lying. And so if you don't see these role models, then what is the interest? And so these are some specific barriers that prevents young ladies into going into STEM and for that matter into ICT. And so for us, Kenyan UST, we came together, 4 women actually. So my co-founders, we are actually 4 in all, decided to look at this and try to keep up the interest of young ladies back in the primary schools, in the second cycle schools, to see how we are able to let them have some interest in pursuing STEM, and so venturing into careers that will lead them into STEM, and so into ICT as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Prof, for sharing your perspective on that, and the challenges that you've really outlined. I'm sure these, of course, are not challenges that Share, has, but they probably might be quite similar to what maybe in Asia or some parts of Asia, or maybe in India as well. And so Shabasi, SB, from your perspective, are there any elements of structural or cultural factors that have impacted women's participation in India's tech landscape? Now, India is known as the tech hub of the world, should I say, but so we might not be so familiar with any form of structural or cultural aspects that may be impacting women's participation in the tech space in India or in Asia. So are you able to share with us if there is such a factor, and what it is?
Thanks, Efua. First and foremost, good to meet Professor and Share. And of course, the forum itself is very close to my heart about girls in ICT. And effort to be very true and based on data facts, I must tell you that it will be surprising for you to see the women in STEM percentage in India. It's one of the highest. It's 43% of women, like the people in STEM is 43%, which is much higher than US, which has got 34%, and UK, which has got 38%. So that bit of jinx or whatever, in terms of not going into STEM, I think we are coming out of it. Okay, that thing has evolved. And as far as women moving, it's not the infrastructure and rest of it which is needed. We have got a clear demarcation of people coming from urban background and from rural. Yes, we don't have that representation from rural, like Shay spoke about Colorado. So we don't have region specific, but we have distinct, difference in urban and rural representation in that. So there are multiple schemes which are happening, and it's fantastic. The more I get into it, go into it, I see that we have a sponsorship for people who have a yearly earning of less than 7,000, their children we will sponsor to do STEM. That kind of movement has started in, and there are multiple non-government organizations which are working on it. Government policies have been made to inculcate more of ICT into ladies and female students and girl students. Those things have been taken care of. However, the problem out here is not on women in STEM, the pipeline. Okay, of course, the pipeline can be widened, and it's a leaky pipeline. So they don't choose a career of technology. Even if they have done a STEM, they don't. That's where the cultural bit comes in. They think that it's a tougher job, it's a more demanding job. The societal, I'll not be able to do justice to it, or they don't have real role models in front of them. So they don't see a career in that. And however, there's another good news that we used to be around 10% women workforce in technology, which has become 29% in 2025.
Oh, that's impressive.
So as on date, that's an excellent transition. Of course, that's not where we are stopping, because now the transition is on the pay gap, and secondly, in terms of where do we take this to the leadership position. That's where they fizzle out, So our main problem is not in India. The main problem is because of all societal norms, the kind of microaggression or the kind of discrimination which is there. They don't reach the leadership level. So our main issue, which I think women in STEM, fine, choosing the career, fine, but are they fizzling out? Are they leaking? Like the pipeline is leaking, right? Is it leaking further? So today we have startups with women CEO. We have got around 7% of our industry led by a female CEO. So those all things are there. Indira Nooyi is there. So many representation from India. However, is it right representation? Do we have equal say at the boardroom. These are the things which is, I think, global issue of disparity. That disparity will always remain. So that's the area which we are working on. So I think I've answered your question, or have I gone a little? I've been very passionate about the topic. That the numbers are increasing, that's
Yeah.
something which has been.
Yeah, yeah, and I must say the India's case is quite remarkable. It's something that I'm hoping that, and I might sound slightly biased, but I'm hoping that my country, Ghana, my home country, Ghana, can take on and and soon, maybe in a decade down from the lane, become the India of Africa, because you've done such a tremendous, you've taken the tech space, learning it, acquiring the necessary skills, and application of it to a whole different level. And of course, as you rightly mentioned, there's a lot of women, in comparison even to America, there's a lot of women in tech or in ICT from India in comparison with Americans. So as a country and as a people, you've definitely done great in finding the right initiative and programs to get people on board. And of course, yes, the rural India might be slightly left behind, but of course they would always catch up. And hopefully these conversations might get in the ear of various policymakers, and perhaps their focus will be more dear to them and bringing them up to speed with the rest of India. But moving on to it, so we are on this very particular conversation or dialogue, where we have looked at how inclusive each of your respective regions are. We're able to clearly understand that America, of course, is well advanced because, of course, you're in an advanced economy, and the likes of India is just tailing you in that regard, and Ghana, and not speaking for the entire Africa, but our stories are quite similar. It's also gradually coming in, and we should gradually build a more inclusive digital economy where there are more initiative or programs that would allow women to participate more, right from primary school, as Professor had mentioned, up onto university and beyond that. And so moving into a more regional perspective side, Shah, you had mentioned the various initiatives that are in your region. You had mentioned some of the initiative, for instance, the women in data, women in tech, Latinas in data, right? And in your perspective, right, how did these engineering start? What did they start from a state level? Did they start from an industry level? Or is it a merger between the two? Because we want to try and understand whether or not it started as a national agenda, or it started as industry executives seeing that there's a need for them to build an inclusive environment which will actually move the needle for the US or for the North America to to have an inclusive digital economy. You're muted.
I am. I gotta pay attention to that button. That's a really great question. We are struggling in the United States at a national level because our new administration is eliminating DEI initiatives. So it is going to be up to companies, regions, states, etc., to keep those initiatives alive. These kind of organizations, Latinas in tech, women in data, they are started with a grassroots approach, possibly in a region, an area, a city, a state, but they have taken over. They are now national programs with affiliates in many cities and other countries. They are expanding rapidly because women do want to be included in the conversation and they want to support other women. So they're excited about participating in those opportunities, leading some of those charges, and really getting creative in how they can pull women into the conversation. It's just a shame where we are headed nationally, but regionally locally, even in rural areas. I actually live in a rural area outside of Denver, in Colorado. We have startup communities that are focused on pulling rural people into the conversation. And many of those are women-led startups. So it's exciting to see that kind of support, not just coming from a big city or coming from a large region, but grassroots efforts to really include everyone in the conversation, no matter where you live, no matter what your economy looks like, and no matter what may be happening above us at a national level that we really just don't have control over anymore.
Great, great to hear. And definitely, as you said, we've of course been hearing what's happening in the US, where there are attempts to destabilize the Department of Education, and DI is currently being attacked because people seem to understand very little the impact of DI, and there are concerns how that would have a global effect or ripple effect globally. Because of course the US has such influence across the globe, and so definitely, as you mentioned, on the national level, there's that concern. But of course, happy to understand that this is a grassroots initiative. So it seems to see that it has a blend of more industry-led initiative from what you shared, and that's what actually propelled it onto a national level. And of course, now we have the current situation, but we don't want to dwell too much on the current situation. So in how it started on a grassroots level with various industry-led or smaller groups, and then of course moved on into the national level. I don't know if there's a similar case for India as well, but Sarbasti, are you able to tell us, is that the same trajectory or pathway when it comes to India as well? Is it quite similar to the US or North America? And in doing that, what sort of, like, you've already touched on briefly some of the initiative, but if you can highlight specific impactful initiative or programs that you're aware of, maybe on a grassroots level, on a national level or province level that you've been familiar with. So this is probably dating back to your time, as a young graduate, because we have some young graduates, what actually drove you into tech, and then what you also realized, or became familiar with as an executive, a global executive working in India, and that actually supported women into the tech space or ICT space or even cybersecurity space, which of course there aren't so many women in cybersecurity.
Yes, frankly, like, we have a clear supportive government policies. So the supportive government policies and mandatory D&I and the percentage of women in industry organization that has been already mandated. So we have Ministry of Electronics and IT who's supporting women to be brought into STEM, rural women to be brought into STEM. So those policies are very clear in terms of, so the trajectory is now the trajectory of getting more and more graduates into STEM, into tech is very clear. That is happening. Okay, of course, we can increase it further, but the point is that, are we getting enough into the leadership role and into the tech field? Is in career path is something which we are working on as of now. So the clear initiatives which are there as of now, which is like recognize every achiever. So we have top 10 women in tech, top 10 women in cybersecurity. So we've got all these awards and all those forums where we recognize them. So which makes people, the role models come up front, so there are role models in there. So the basic initiative and program supporting girls in STEM has been like, we have girls who code. So all girls who know coding teach the code. So that happens every, summer trip or whatever. We create those kind of things pan India, and it's not region specific. It's pan India. Even in villages also we do that, right? So girls who learn coding. Then India STEM Foundation. We've got the STEM Foundation where we create all kinds of mentorship, and how much of it is reaching the public is still a little debatable. But however, the platforms have been created where we can engage and get more and more insight into how to improve that. And then we've got scholarship programs. So the top, performers and all, we will get we give. We have mentorship program. Like I've been a mentee and I have been a mentor also. So I've been a mentor in UK. I've been a mentor when I was posted in Ghana, and it's been like it's so heartening to see female who actually want to do well, but there are certain social norms or whatever which makes them take a diversion or whatever. But those are the clear programs. And then we've got corporate internship and training programs also. Like in Professor, when I was posted in Ghana as a CTO, there was a FESSP program.
Yeah.
Where we used to get engineers and from the engineering colleges, female engineer scholarship program. So those are the kind of program which I've been part of, and I've mentored them, and I know how exactly to groom this stream of people who are going to be our future leaders. Only that portion is yet to be worked out. How do we bring them to the leadership role? So my key area is government. By government support is there, unlike many other countries, we have full government support in terms of. We have got industry support in terms of getting more and more female in technology. However, female in leadership and the pay gap, pay disparity is something which we have to work on.
Okay, thank you so very much, SB, for mentioning that. And I'm very happy that you had mentioned, the initiative with the engineering department of KNUST with Vodafone, which sponsors or gives scholarship to women or girls who are studying engineering, and that's one of the initiatives I'm more familiar with as well myself. And of course, we've seen how the measurable difference it has made for several women who ended up, moving from KNUST and then University of Ghana's engineering department into, going into work with the likes of Vodafone and etc. So there was a clear, defined pathway with respect to that particular scholarship, where the girls that went through that scholarship, the young women that went through that scholarship, ended up with firms like Vodafone, MTN, etc., and which is one of the great initiatives that are very much commendable. Now, but I would go back to share, but I want Prof to come in once that we've touched base on Ghana and an initiative that's currently working. And we can attest to the measurable difference it's making in women in tech, or girls or young women in tech. What are some of the bold steps that is needed in academia? So, yeah, we've seen what is happening with this particular initiative, but can we do more? Do we still have leeway? Is this expandable? So what bold steps are needed in academia to increase enrollment and the retention of girls in the tech education, and also sort of like create a pathway from, we're not just training you to be engineers or data scientists or data analysts, etc., or pharmacists or telecom engineers or whatever, or medical students or medical doctors, but there's a clear direct pathway that once you go through this journey of education where you gain the knowledge and skills, you are sort of like made ready to fit the job markets, let me put that. So sort of like a placement strategy. And so what are the bold steps that are needed in academia to do that?
Right, thank you very much. So a lot is being done at the moment. So, for example, I'm picking it from the middle, then I'll come to my end, and then probably where I wanted to start from. Right. So at the moment, for example, entry to KNUST, KNUST has the affirmative action, where if you want to go into STEM or engineering fields, for example, in the university, cutoff, we add a +1 or +2 aggregate for the female counterparts. And so, for example, if for a particular year group, you all have aggregate 16, for example, to enter into the university. And then if you want to enter into electrical and electronics engineering, and you have aggregate 17 or 18, and you are a woman, you are accepted into reading the course. because the understanding is that coming from the SHS, there are a lot of limitations, a lot of barriers for the young ladies. And so at the point where we are entering the university, and of course, every year, if you look at the applicants, you have a large number of males and then just a few number of females applying. And so that's the affirmative action for admissions for KNUST, and has been going on for some time. And if you check our data from 2018 up until now, you realize that at the engineering area, the numbers are increasing, even though it's not hugely increasing, but it is going up a little bit. And that is what we are doing now. And then at the university as well, there are a number of groups. For example, I was coordinating a program for the Millennium Development Authority. They used to have internship and mentoring program for young ladies in the tech industry and then in general STEM industry. So, for example, if you are pursuing careers in these areas and then you are running a course at KNUST, you have 8 weeks of internship and then you are mentored as well. Because the understanding is that if you sit in the classroom and you do not see any practicals in the field, as you are going from first year to the final year, then your interest in the area goes down. And so we run this program for internships and of course the internship is generally for students pursuing these courses, but we have specific interests for young ladies in the areas, especially in electricals, in electronics, in mechanical engineering, and so on and so forth. Right. And then, my earlier submission was going to come from the government. So actually, the 1992 Constitution of Ghana, Article 17, actually makes room for gender equality for all. So that is, of course, our document we are using. That is the Constitution. And so when we come down, of course, from 1992 up until now, we have pockets of individuals and corporate organizations who try to support young women and building their interest in the tech industry. From 2018, Ghana started the Girls in ICT program. I served as a mentor in the ICT program for young ladies, and here the interest was to look at the first cycle and second cycle students to run them through different areas, different courses, sometimes we do in the tech space. And so this Girls in ICT program has run for a number of years. Then currently we also have the president launching the coding training, right? 1 million coders, for example. So this is specifically training individuals for them to have a feel and to have an interest and to have some knowledge in the area of the tech space. So all these initiatives are there, but because we have lagged behind for a number of years, and so this is like the gentle steps we are taking. And so at this point, you do not have a huge number of women in the space, but gradually women are being trained in the space for them to have some feel, for them to have an interest. Of course, in somewhere in 2020, 2022 as well, Ghana also looked at bringing STEM education. And so this STEM education is actually targeting specific senior high schools, that this high school will serve as a model STEM school, where the students are specifically taught some courses that will lead them into venturing into the tech space or into the STEM field. And so these are some of the things that we are doing as a country. And then I think we are moving like the tortoise, but in another conversations, we will have very good stories to tell as to how we are growing in the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Prof, for touching base on the various initiatives that are being taken, on both from the university perspective and then from the government side, which you mentioned. And there was a comment you made, which I was happy you clarified, because I was just about to ask you, doesn't that, dilute it? Now, you had mention of the cutoff points for women coming into the university in competitive science or technology. or engineering and courses or programs, and you know there's a lower grade that is acceptable for them. And of course, it made me very concerned about that, because we want women to be able to compete with our men on the exact same level or merit, right? So if the gentlemen are coming in with 2 A's and 3 B's, or 5 A's and 3 B's, then that's acceptable. The women should equally come in with that same one. But we understand what you had mentioned. You clarify that the reason behind that is because of the biases they face in secondary schools. And so it means that more work needs to be done when it comes to young women and girls in our secondary schools that are taking on science related courses, or just even want to venture into science when they go into the university level, by ensuring that the teachers and the education system there is not biased to them, so they can compete on an equal merit basis with the guys, because we don't want the narrative to be like, you know, because this is some of the reasons why DEI is having a challenge now in America, because people have a sentiment that the people that are given the opportunity via DEI do not merit it, and that is not the case. Many of these people actually merit it, and far more merited than it. And the only reason why they don't have it is because they probably their educational background, or their not even mention educational background, their social background or racial background does not give them the opportunity or leverage in comparison with their colleagues. And so I'm hoping that eventually, maybe a decade from now, 5 years or half a decade from now, the girls will be coming in on a merit basis than, you know, lowering the grade for them to be able to enter. Now, I'm being mindful of time. Bashir, I would love you to come in here. And then of course we'll go into the mentorship and leadership and representation side of the conversation, because we've spoke about inclusive participation in the digital economy, and we've gone on to talk about the various regional perspectives and opportunities that you're all familiar with. And I believe that we're all taking, you know, we've seen some similarities in our regions, and have a clear understanding of what is happening in each country. And I would like Claire to come in here, but I would want Claire to actually come at the later stage. So we're going to go straight into the mentorship and leadership side, because Claire, what I want you to speak about will be on the lessons from the US that you believe would be adaptable for an African market, or a country like Ghana. India is, SB is telling us that they are comparable to the US, and so it seems that our focus now is on the conversation is on Africa or Ghana. But before we come to that particular question, I want us to build on the mentorship and leadership and representation conversation, and perhaps there will be certain missing elements there that are missing from these other regions that may be in your region. And of course, you can then come in with what lessons or relevant actions that are happening in the US that you believe can be adapted in these other regions. And so talking about, the strategic value of leadership, you're all women leaders from the academia and from corporate. And you've stated your own journeys of how you came into tech, the various initiatives that are happening in your space. Some of you have been involved in grassroots, initiatives and national level initiatives as well. But SB, can you share? I know that you have some military experience or exposure aside the corporate one. Are you able to tell us how you've navigated both these corporate and military leadership, and what sort of influence it had on you going into tech, and even in mentoring these young girls and women that you've been mentoring in the ICT or tech or STEM space, if there were any influences that you had during your time in military as a leader that enabled you to be able to effectively mentor these young girls. And I want you to, take it from the perspective, as I said, from the corporate experience. This is your time at Vodafone, where you're doing a little bit more reflection to see whether there was any form of cross-generator, any impact or influence in respect to your military experience when you were, going through this cross-generational mentorship? Because you are for higher experience level, have more years and all of that, and you are mentoring people who are much far younger than you. And so I want to better understand from your perspective, what your personal experience and exposure and how they translated into how you did your cross-generational mentorship with women who were coming into ICT or tech or STEM. I hope my question is clearer.
Yes, very clear and very interesting as well, because it was not even thought of, like I was part of the first 100 females recruited into Indian Army. So, which was also not thought of because women in technology is not there as such, right? So you always think that when you want to become an engineer, I'm talking out of my personal experience, your family generally says, oh, so you will be moving around with a hammer in your hand, that kind of. So the concept of technology and what all it can do. So because I'm talking about late 90s, right? So it's the 1990s. So it's not, many of the kids nowadays were not born even. Okay, so basically from there moving into, so I've always been, let me see what happens. Let me see what happens, is the kind of thing. So I joined this big Indian Army, and we were part of the initial guinea pigs, I must say, because they also have never handled a lady officer, they used to call it officer, and women who wear boots and are, shoulder to shoulder, they're running, playing, everything, doing. So, and Indian society, it's also, we have got our own inhibitions as such as, disparities are there. So that taught me in terms of handling every kind of, that experience has taught me to handle every kind of people, because the recruit and the recruit who used to, privates who used to join me are from very rural and very young background. Okay, now to accept me as a leader, I had to be part of them, right? Even if I have to change some of my dressing sense, I have to be part of them, merge with them. So those things probably imbibe those kind of leadership with me, which made it very easy for me to handle young females whom I recruited. So I recruited whichever organization I've worked in, be it Vodafone India, Vodafone Mumbai. I recruited at one point of time 23 graduate engineer trainees. Similarly, the FASSP program in Ghana, so KNUST and other university girls who came in. So I could relate to them in terms of their young, fresh minds, right? If you lead them by example, show them how the leaders should behave, what they see in future, they will get it. They will get it in their mind that, okay, this is the kind of leader. And I must appreciate that my background in military did help in terms of handling diverse people, diversity because India itself is diverse. So India, we have got huge amount of diversity within India itself. So handling all South India to North India, people are different language, different way of working, different way of talking, everything. So if I could handle that as a men, all men under me, to a set of girls who are young, bubbling with energy, they just want some motivation to continue and get it done. It helped me a lot. Be it UK, be it Ghana, be it India, these girls are young, energetic. They've chosen career in technology. We just have to hold them right and lead them by example. You cannot just preach them and move out. You have to lead them by example, move shoulder to shoulder with them. And that's what probably is my military background, which helped me in terms of doing it. But I'm very proud of all my mentees and all my mentors as well. And Vodafone has significant, beautiful program all around the world in terms of, getting more and more females into technology.
Great. Thank you so very much, SB, for sharing that perspective, how your military influenced your mentorship style, and what you also did with your mentors, not just mentor them and then you sort of like you still guide them in how in helping them navigate their career path in IT, and which is very much recommendable. We Prof, as he has mentioned, how her military background and influenced her corporate style when it came to mentoring these young women, doing the cross-generational mentorship. Now, you are in academia, you are in a leadership position as well, and